Hello, Jonathan Agnew here, welcoming you to another classic View from the Boundary from Test Match Special. Today we're going back to late August 2013 and to the Oval. With England having already won the Ashes, Alistair Cook's side were looking to make it a 4-0 series win. The first 3 days of the game had seen big centuries for Shane Watson and a certain Steve Smith, as well as a Test debut for England's Chris Woakes. Come the fourth day, and sadly the Saturday of the Test was completely washed out as rain circled South London and refused to go away. That didn't stop our guest, however. Paul Merton is a writer, comedian, actor, radio host, travel presenter, and perhaps best known as one of the captains in the long-running series Have I Got News for You? He's also a passionate cricket fan and hot-footed it across London when he heard he might be needed on air rather sooner than he expected.
I was at home at about 12:05, expecting to be interviewed at 1:30 today.
Yes.
And I suddenly heard, I was listening to the coverage and the commentary and filling the time in, and you said, lunch break is at 12:30, so I suddenly thought you might need me. So
yes.
I jumped out of the bath and hailed a cab. The two are very close, and hence I'm here.
So it's a wet bath water shirt rather than rain
Well,
water.
it's a bit rainy as well, but it is sort of, it's quite heavy out there. You get the feeling, looking at the outfield there, that it's going to be tricky today, I think, isn't it? It's not looking good. No.
It's such a shame, and it's a great effort to come under these circumstances. Thank you.
Well, no, it's a pleasure. I mean, I didn't grow up sort of playing cricket. Our school didn't have a cricket team or anything like that, and I kind of got into it through listening to Test Match Special initially in the days of John Arlott and Brian Johnson and all those people. I had actually worked with Brian Johnson on a thing called Trivia Test Match. Do you remember that sort of Radio 4?
I remember the name.
It was a show meant to be based on the rules of cricket, but basically you scored 4 runs if you got an answer right. And if you got an answer wrong, you were caught out. And we used to go to Brian used to host that, and Sir Tim Rice and Willie Ruston were the team captains.
Great cricket lovers too.
Yeah, absolutely. And you'd go to sort of like these various cricket grounds around the sort of southeast of London and Kent, sort of not too far away. And I loved it. He called me Murters at one point, which I understand is a great accolade. So I was very pleased with that. But it was one of the, very early on, meeting Willie Rushton, who was one of those people, like you mentioned, I'm sorry, I haven't a clue there. I said to him, Willie, because he was part of all that sort of satire boom in the 1960s, the David Frost show and stuff. And I said, Willie, were the 60s as good as everybody cracked them up to be? And he said, well, yes, they were, but you have to remember how bloody horrible the 50s were. In comparison, just after the war, in context, we were sort of, we were down on our knees, weren't we? The rationing went on and all that sort of stuff. So to meet somebody like Willie, and to meet Brian Johnson, and
what do you remember about Brian in those days?
Well, he was an extremely posh man. I remember this story about, I think it was his grandmother, or probably even his mother, I think. She had, around about 1910, there was a system, if you lived in the West End of London, where you could phone the theatre, whichever was playing at the theatre, and the man at the other end of the phone would hold the receiver up to the stage so you could listen to a West End production in your own home.
No, really?
And it's in his autobiography, this happened about 1910, and I thought, well, I'm not even that posh now, I could do that, But that was, his love of language, his love of comedians. He was a big fan of the Crazy Gang, wasn't he? And things like that. Extremely good interviewer, very good broadcaster, and just his love of the game and his infectious chuckle is on days like this is when you have to sort of remind yourself that actually, when it's going, there's no other sport like it.
Yeah, that's such a kind man. Do you feel like a warm individual?
Yes.
Loved that programme, for instance, especially since it's about cricket. He'd have loved that.
Oh, it was. His autobiography, his last one was called Someone Who Was.
That's right.
Because he realised he probably wasn't going to be around for another 10 years or so. But absolutely charming man, and as you would, he was exactly as you would expect him to be.
Yes.
He wasn't. There was no sort of. He wasn't putting on a performance. That was him. His love of sort of schoolboy humour. His the famous thing with you, which you still listen to, and it's one of the great classics of radio.
That make you laugh?
Oh yeah, absolutely, because it's the desperate professionalism trying to creep in, sort of like we mustn't laugh, and of course it makes it even funnier. It's like laughing in church or laughing somewhere inappropriate.
Yes.
We're meant to be professional people, and it's let's talk professionally, and it's bubbling away, and it's like a little volcano, and it's going to go.
And it did.
And it did, because it has to.
Yeah. Has it happened to you? Have you corpsed badly? Have you been incapable?
Well, you have to be careful when you're on stage, I think, because it's sort of. we do a lot of improvisation, the stuff I do now. Really, I always at the Comedy Store every Sunday doing the show, and if you're corpse on the stage, we're making each other laugh, and the audience aren't in on it, then they sort of get a bit resentful.
Yes.
It's like, well, okay, you're enjoying your yourself, but you have to communicate that to us. If they see the reason why you've laughed, because somebody just says something absolutely hilarious. The afternoon Henry came in to see us at Edinburgh, one of the chaps was doing a sort of, suddenly did this funny walk that was just hilarious in context, and we just roar with laughter and think, no, concentrate, and concentrate, you're on stage. You know?
It is true, and that sort of corpsing, if actually it's only funny to us two happening at the time and people are listening,
then
I know from other ones,
then it becomes embarrassing.
It does. It's sort of laughing at yourself and with yourself.
Yes, I think it's the effort to show that you're really battling it that sort of justifies it. Yes. You know, because in the end it's overwhelming.
Yeah. Brian's face that day, honestly.
Yes, I'm sure
it was absolutely brilliant. Like he'd taken a right hook from Mike Tyson. Over at the other end though, we're in the boxes down there.
Oh, was it at this ground?
Well, they more or less sort of shut that comedy box down after that. I felt like that was probably that was the end of it.
Never be bettered. Never be bettered.
No. So it was listening to the radio that got you into cricket then?
Yes. I mean, I was listening yesterday to the conversation you were having with Stephen Fry about the contest between bat and ball, and it's very interesting that the game is 200 years old or whatever, and still that hasn't changed. I would listen to sort of, when the coverage on the BBC in the very early days in the 60s was basically you've got a camera at one end, and if half a fag stand in the middle of it, you ain't going to see the wicket.
It's a bit of a challenge, isn't it?
The umpire's called Arthur Fag. I mean, how can you not fall in love with a sport that has, with his big long white coat, and then you sort of you realise actually the commentary on the radio is so much better in those days because you couldn't see very much and there wasn't any replays, and whereas now, you're still conjuring up the imagery as you always did then. I mean, one of my favourite shows, Hancock's Half Hour, doesn't date on the radio because sound recording was perfected, 80 years ago. So It doesn't sound any worse than it does now. But you conjure up just the imagery of what's happening out there. And I think that's, with Henry with the buses going down over there and stuff, this is how little so I know cricket, but there's certain definitions I don't understand. I found this out only the other day, and this makes cricket even more endearing to me. I said to somebody the other day, now mid-off, I've got that. Now silly mid-off, what is that like? Is that an acute angle or something? He said no, it's because it's silly. It's close to the batsman.
Yes.
I never realised that.
Really.
So it's a sport that incorporates the word silly into its rules and into its positions.
Yeah.
I mean, that's fantastic. And I always thought it was some acute angle off the hypotenuse or something.
No. Far too technical for all of it. Would you like to have played? I mean, now you've got into it and you listen and you watch and you come to test matches. Do you regret they hadn't had the chance to play? Yeah,
I do. I've only just started taking up golf. I mean, cricket's a game where you need other people to play with you, don't you?
Yes.
With football, you can at least kick a ball against the wall. Unless you're just bowling at a wicket drawn on a brick wall or something, there's not much you can do.
No.
So I don't know. It just wasn't in our sort of family culture to play cricket much. The schools never did it, so it was just something that I never worried about it or thought about it that much. But I think also the hardness of the ball the first time you faced that, when I was probably in my 30s, the first time I actually sort of held a bat, and you go, what's and this is a slow bowler, and you realise that maybe that's a certain degree of courage is needed to take the game up in the first place, because the ball is hard, and if you're as a 7-year-old, you feel that hard ball, you think, this isn't for me, or you think, I can't wait to get some of this. So maybe it's a bit like the 11 plus, it sorts you out early on.
Well, I tell you, it does, and a lot of people who sit where you're sitting now in this chat will have been keen cricketers as kids, but they took a knock, they took a blow on the head or something, and that put them off, and they never played again, which is
well, it's a hard sport. I mean, it is a very hard sport. I mean, you have your guests talk about facing the West Indies bowling team in the 1980s. Yes. I mean, it was just frightening. It's coming from 6'7" in height, and it. No wonder batsmen had to get some kind of protection because, certainly around the headgear and stuff. But the courage it needs to stand out there every time is like going into the ring with Mike Tyson at his peak or something. There's a danger you're going to get hurt.
Absolutely.
The difference between success and failure is minuscule, is tiny. The poor bowler the other day that was suffering, the slow bowler now.
Yes, for old Kerrigan.
Unfortunately, he's in the spotlight and there's things to remember because he kept bowling those balls. A batsman that's out of nick goes for 2 and 0, and he's only in the crease for 7 minutes. There's not much to dwell on. You just think, those that you don't. So you don't worry too much about that. Whereas in his position, he can't do anything about it.
It's a really good way of putting it, because most people we have in here are batsmen. They'll say to the bowler, "You've got all those chances to get it right. I only get 2 chances, and I'm out twice in the match." But I'm with you on that.
Well, if a batsman's in bad form, really bad form,
he's away.
He's gone, and the next guy comes in and gets 100. Nobody really thinks about it.
Yes.
You as a bowler get knocked for 28, get knocked for 30.
Absolutely right.
It's there to be replayed. Those are the shots.
Exposed.
Those are things.
You've got to come back again, and the fellow who hit you might be 120 by now.
And he's got all the confidence in the world because he's looking straight at you, so I can hit you wherever I like.
See, that's total logic. I'm with you. You should be a top-class bowler.
Well, I think you probably need more than that, but...
Where to start?
All right, what time does it stop raining today?
I'll warm up. Roll his sleeves up.
Well, maybe that's because of the bowler in that position is an individual that he's bowling for. He's also bowling for his team, obviously, first of all, but he's got to bowl for himself. He's got to bowl for his position. Maybe that's a bit like being a stand-up comic when you're somebody on your own, you know. A batsman is in a team of batsmen.
Yes.
Bowlers are only, four or five players in a team, but everybody's expected to bat. Not everybody's expected to bowl.
Correct.
So, yeah, I mean, I can understand that.
You're bowler friendly.
Yeah.
So having not played but listened and got into it then, when did you first start to go watching cricket? What are your early memories and games? You mentioned the West Indies. Did you see them? Did you actually see them in the 80s?
No, it's sort of... I was somebody that, during the 1980s, I was trying to sort of get into show business. I didn't have a great deal of money. I lived in a bedsit. I sort of was going out sort of getting £20 a night here and there doing 20 minutes, you know. So the idea of going to a cricket match or something like that was beyond me, you know. It's sort of... and I missed out. I realise I have missed out on that. But I've still got plenty of time to get into it now, I suppose. But, it was... You know, when you go up to the Edinburgh Festival every August, and it's usually done, there's a test match being played, and it was England versus Australia, and we got out of the car and somebody turned the radio on and both of them's just got a wicket, and we get into the flat, get the keys, open up the flat, put the radio on, he's just got another wicket. That thing where you can come into the game and stay with the game and then come away from it again is you know, because it's being played over the course of 5 days, 6 hours a day, is extraordinary. And so I don't feel I need to be at the game. You know, although when you see the view like this, I mean, this is astonishing. But I tend to sort of dip in and out the whole time. But maybe I should go more. I'm thinking of going on holiday to Australia this year. It'd be a good time to go, wouldn't it?
You're going to come?
Well, I'll have to speak to the wife about it. But yeah,
well, you can bring her too.
Oh yeah, she likes a bit of cricket. Yeah, absolutely. She liked the weather. She hates the English winter. You know.
Well, you'd love that.
Yeah. Well, Henry mentioned it the other day, so you know, I don't think we're quite house guests yet. But
do the Australians understand your humour? Are you big in Australia?
I think they've just been showing some of the travel shows there, so I'm a bit aware of that. I played Melbourne and Sydney for 6 weeks back in the 1980s doing stand-up, and they tended to get the same things. But at first you're unsure. You know, there's some reference to the Salvation Army or something, and suddenly you go, hang on, do you know what the Salvation Army is here? And you have to check things like that, you know. But generally speaking, it's the same. But if you made any jokes about New Zealanders, that was the funniest thing you could say to an Australian audience.
Easy knock-off.
They're like, he's going already at the back. It's like you could have the funniest jokes in the world. If you suggested that New Zealand has had an unusual relationship with their livestock, that could be the funniest joke you've ever said.
Not original, maybe.
No, they didn't care about that. They felt as if they'd had their money's worth.
See, stand-up comedy must be terrifying, isn't it? And especially starting off. Your first one. I mean, well, the
first one was I was very lucky here at the Comedy Store in London. I'd written this sketch about a policeman giving evidence in court. I'd rehearsed it. I'd never got up on stage before. It was about 4 minutes long. It was during the time of the Brixton riots, so there was a lot of sort of unrest in London and stuff. And I went on and I did this thing, and they just loved it. They loved it to the extent where I had to do it again. It was 4.5 minutes long, and I walked all the way back from the Comedy Store, which was then in the middle of Soho, to Streatham, along past the Oval here, no doubt, on my way home on a cloud of absolute joy. That got me through every bad gig for the next 18 months afterwards.
Just that one reaction.
Oh, it was everything I'd wanted to do. Imagine you'd always wanted to be a cricketer, and you walk out in the Oval or at Lords or something, and you get a hat trick or you score a century. It was like that, but instantly.
Yes.
I thought, well,
and you do float.
Oh, you float. I mean, I knew that I didn't really know what I was doing, but I was lucky in that what I'd written was good. But I didn't have another 4.5 minutes like that for a long, long time. But it was a very early indicator that, yes, you can do this.
Yes, which is important.
Oh, because it gets you through all the bad ones, because nobody knows who you are. You come on, the microphone's not working, you're not very good. You know, there's all those factors that combine against you.
Yes. Did you fight out on somebody first, or did you literally... This was the first airing of this The
great
classic
thing about the Comedy Store was that Don Ward, who opened this up, was just democratised the whole of comedy, because I wanted to be a stand-up comedy when Jeff Boycott, you know, at his age, wanted to be a batsman, or you wanted to be a bowler. When I was 7 or 8, that's what I wanted to do. But my options then, in the 1970s, were Cambridge Footlights, Red Coat wrote in a Butlins holiday camp, working club comic. I mean, no natural areas for me. The Comedy Store opened up one night. You could go on stage. If you were any good, you could come back. And that's all. It didn't matter who you were, just get up and do it.
Yes.
And so that one factor, the Comedy Store opening in 1979, probably revolutionised the whole last 25 years of light entertainment in this country.
Well, I was going to ask you, I mean, not just you, but many others presumably
totally.
began there.
There were no comedy clubs in London.
Yeah.
There was nothing. So where did you go? Where did you go? Where if you want to play cricket? Where is the nearest net? Where is somebody that can bowl at you? You need to have, they talk about sort of, practice at being, the time you spend in the crease is very valuable in a test match. It's like anything. Time you spend on stage is valuable,
Yes.
even if they're booing you off. Next time, remember why they booed you off.
I can't imagine that. You must have witnessed some horrible ones of people there.
The worst one I ever saw.
This could be cruel.
Well, it was first of all the audience were medical students. Medical students, for some reason, are the worst behaved. I think because maybe they're sort of like they're still young and they're facing matters of life and death and operations or whatever it is. They drink and they go nuts. So first of all, it was medical students. They're also in fancy dress, so they're not really an audience at all. They're dressed in fancy dress. The venue was at the London Dungeon.
Oh no!
Where the people on stage could see waxworks of people being boiled in oil, somebody over here being hung, while they're saying, "Oh, and here's a funny thing," to somebody dressed as Napoleon. I mean, it was just dreadful. And at the end, the promoter refused to pay them. I mean, we got that sorted out. But that was, in terms of what could go wrong, that was pretty dreadful. Every act lasted about 3 minutes.
Yes. Everybody timed on. I mean, that was a gong went or something. And that was a lot.
You were meant to do 20 minutes in. There was no point. They'd stop watching. But the difference to that, though, I no longer do the stand-up comedy. Now that I do is the improv thing, where there's 5. The show that
this
Henry
sounds
saw.
fascinating.
Oh, it's great. There's 5 of us on stage, so you've got no jokes to prepare or anything, nothing to worry about. You commentate. You can't. You can get ready for a commentary, but you can't practice phrases because you don't know what's going to be happening. So we have nothing to. There is no show. We don't care. We go on. The show evolves while we're there, and as soon as it stops, it's disappeared. So we don't have any pre-show nerves. We don't, because there's no show. It doesn't exist.
But I thought they'd be more nervous because there was no show.
But there isn't anything. What's to get nervous about?
Well, the fact you haven't got anything.
But what particular aspect of nothing what bothers you? All of it.
Well, there's lots of people there waiting for you to do something. You haven't got anything.
Okay, we started. So we're the Comedy Store players, or we are the Impro Chums. I have with me Mr. Jonathan Agnew, and then we start a scene. I say something to you, you say something back to me. Somebody else comes on and says something else. You start singing, somebody else starts dancing. After 45 minutes, we have a little interval to come back again. Henry will confirm all this. This is what we do, and it's sort of. I mean, okay, I'm saying this with the basis of having done this for 30 years.
Right.
But we're on stage. The proviso is you're improvising, and it has to be entertaining. There's no point in saying, well, it's not entertaining, but it's improvised.
But even that's pressure, though. You have to be funny.
Well, yeah, but then I don't know, perhaps you'll say that as somebody, if you could imagine yourself in that position. I mean, I wouldn't imagine myself opening the bowling for England because I know I wouldn't be able to do it. I don't know if I'd feel much pressure. I probably would, actually, because I wouldn't want to make a complete idiot of myself, but I would. So I wouldn't take it that seriously. But with the improv, there is no, the first game is you do a game where a film and theatre style or something. So we start a scene and we're perhaps a couple of plumbers in a house,
right.
And somebody says freeze and somebody says carry it on in a Western style, and you say something like, I ain't seen taps like these since the Jesse James gang, or something like that. And off we go, up and running.
Stop. I do the odd theatre thing, but I've got sheets of paper.
Oh, yes, that's stuff for you to worry about.
I've got... Is it?
Yeah. But then you've got to have that because it's just a different show. I wouldn't say that every show should just do what we do. But I don't know what I'm going to be doing in 10 minutes' time. I might be singing. I might be being a snake. I might be Boris Johnson and Eamon Holmes. I mean, I could be anything.
And it always works for you. You've never had a moment of sort of frozen terror where you think, my God, I really don't know what I'm going to do. I'm blank.
Not frozen terror. You do have a moment where you don't think of something, but there's four or five of you, so you're never on your own.
Yes.
You're never on your own. It is a team game where you have individuals, but you're never on your own. And so nobody's going to... I mean, there are rules. But once you know what the rules are, you can break them. A rule is to say, you agree an ad with somebody, for example. So I say, doctor, thank goodness you're here. And you say, yes, I'm sorry I'm late. Now, where's your mother? And I say, oh, she's upstairs. So you've agreed you're a doctor, you've added the mother, and I said she's upstairs, I've added that. Now, equally, you could do it, I could say, doctor, thank God you're here. And you say, I'm not a doctor, I'm a plumber. All right, we've got to laugh. But all right, okay, what do we do now then? Okay, well, it's me waterworks. You better come and help and fix me, or something. But so you can break the rules,
yes,
but with the confidence of knowing that you're never going to put anybody in trouble.
But you could, though, couldn't you? You could horribly stitch somebody up.
Oh yeah, well, that's why you work with people you like. Oh, you could do, but then the show would suffer. Yeah. Here's an interesting thing about audience psychology. We do a game called Foreign Lecturer, where basically somebody talks gibberish. So we get something, we say, can we have a foreign country? Somebody might say Belgium. I say, what particular aspect of life in Belgium? Somebody might say keeping the trams clean in Antwerp. Okay. So I have with an expert who's going to talk to us on the subject of keeping the trams clean in Antwerp. Off you go, and he goes, and I go, many days in Antwerp, I'm cleaning the trams. He goes like this. So he's just talking rubbish. But at some point, if I might say something like, that reminds me of a very funny joke, the audience look at the foreigner and they think he's in trouble.
Right, oh, see.
But he's not. He's not in any trouble at all, because all he has to go is, there's this horse walks into a bar. He doesn't have to, all he's doing is go, but if you say something like that, they think, oh, you've put him in the spot, but you haven't.
Is your confidence unshakable now? To go on and do something like that night after night?
Yeah. I mean, with that show, yes, absolutely. I
mean, got it. You've got total control over it.
Oh yes, absolutely. I mean, I did a show last year I toured with, which was a written show that had sort of magical effects in it, and had bits that had to be deliberately sort of rehearsed and done the same way every time, and that was terrifying before the first one in Margate. I was really absolutely, because there was loads of stuff to worry about. What if that effect doesn't work? What if that joke doesn't work? Yes. What if that sketch doesn't get any better than it was last night?
So you do have worries then, in fact. But
doing that type of show,
yes,
when you know you're going to be doing it again. But with the impro, you say, oh, that bit didn't quite work, but that's gone now.
Yes. Astonishing. And it must be so
it's exhilarating.
I would be exhausted after
No, not at all. Up in Edinburgh, we only do an hour. There's 5 of us, and off you go. It's sort of, you enjoy it. You're with your mates. You're having a time of your life. It's fantastic, exhilarating. I mean, we almost enjoy it as much as the audience do.
Yeah. What extent of comedy do you find unacceptable? I mean, or do you not? I mean, you can be terribly personal, can't you? I mean, have I got news for you? Can really be cutting. Is there a line for you? And is it becoming increasingly difficult for comedians to find suitable topics almost? I mean, it seems to me that it's sort of being constricted a lot.
I think if you're at a comedy club and you go to see a comedy show, there's certain material you can hear there which you wouldn't want to put on television, I think. On Have I Got News for You, we don't tend to go for the ordinary person in the street, somebody that's, coming to the news for no, reasons of their own, somebody's been guilty of a crime or victim of a crime or something. With the impro stuff that we do, we ask for suggestions from the audience, and somebody will write something down, and you read and you look at it and we can't do that. And it will be something that will be a terrible story in the news, which a child gets kidnapped or something, and you just can't do it. So, for me, there are boundaries, yes, of course, but I don't want to say you can't laugh about anything, because humour is so important to us. We need to sort of, particularly when times are bad, it's one of the things that keeps us alive and keeps us vibrant, I think, and keeps us optimistic, is the fact that we can laugh about things. And when I didn't have any money, lived in bedsits and stuff, that was my choice, and I was still going down the pub for 3 pints of beer and have a great time on those 3 pints of beer. So yes. It's humour is, I wouldn't say you can't make jokes about anything, because then you're sort of, if you make a joke and somebody laughs, it's a joke, it's funny. If somebody else hates it, then to them it's not a joke.
Yes. Are politicians just completely fair game, do you think? I mean, every aspect, even personal...
They are the weirdest people you've ever met in your life. I don't know if you've ever met them, but they are so strange. They have no idea how the rest of the world sees them. They don't care.
You really think they don't care? Are they so thick-skinned?
Totally. I mean, some of them are just sort of like, you think, well, if you were walking down the street, you would draw attention to yourself just by the way you are. Michael Fabricant was on Have I Got News for You. I mean, I thought he was a puppet. I mean, he was just extraordinary. I mean, the trouble is, he's surrounded by admirers. He says something that's funny, or he thinks it's funny, and they all laugh. Oh, yeah, Michael, he's always very funny. What a wag he is. And then you hear him say it, and it's like, well, what's that? And he just laughs, and people are sort of like just looking at him, and he sort of brushes it off. But politicians are... I think you probably need to have that one less layer of skin to be a politician in the first place.
Right.
Or a desire to believe that you are born to do it,
But if politicians are being ridiculed all the time, not all the time, but your sort of programme does ridicule politicians, does that actually sort of generalise that people, the sort of lack of respect for politicians in a way? Does it encourage that feeling that politicians aren't?
Well, I think it's the way behaviour. I think it's the way politicians behave encourages a lack of respect for politicians. I think if they can get hold of something that's funny and be seen in a humorous way, that can be a very powerful political weapon, because people don't always question you too closely if you're seen as a jolly person. So I think Have I Got News for You has certainly been used in that way in the past. But I wanted to just go completely off another tangent, just talking about a closed world for a moment. I heard this quote on Test Match Special the other week. Right. I'm not sure which one of you said this, but I thought this should be one of the quotes of the year. You were talking about what was happening out in the middle. You said, somebody said, if a Martian landed on the planet Earth right now, he'd be baffled by some of these field placings. How do you think that sounds to the outside world?
I don't know. I suspect it was me that said it, but I mean, I think it was me. I think I've had a few Martians landing. What's wrong with that?
Well,
you tell me what's wrong.
You're
with
assuming that a Martian will have a basic knowledge of cricket to question the field placings. That's what's wrong with it.
Well, there you go, ripping my work apart.
I said it's one of the great quotes. I think it's fantastic.
Well, I'm quite offended.
No, don't be offended, Jonathan. Don't be offended.
I'm teasing.
You are. That's marvellous.
I'm glad that you wrote it down.
Yeah, I wrote it down. I wrote down some other things in case we run out of stuff to say.
I hadn't run out yet.
No, of course.
I was going to move on to Laurel and Hardy, because I used to love Laurel and Hardy.
Did you?
Yes. Silly sort of slapstick humour. I was more of a Laurel and Hardy with sound.
Yes.
Whereas you would be a silent Laurel and Hardy man.
The Laurel and Hardy silent films are better than the early sound films, and they're much quicker. There's more of a zip to them. The editing's much quicker. When sound first came in, you had to sort of stand there and talk quite slowly. But then, of course, as they developed, the sound films got great. Children love Laurel and Hardy because they love Laurel and Hardy. They love adults being silly because it upsets their normal view of the world. Adults are sort of like, OK, that's enough of that, or would you like a bit of this? No, time to go to bed. But they can't seem to paint a wall without getting covered themselves in paint. So this is the thing that I think children particularly find very...
I used to love it.
They're great.
Is it a shocking admission to say, look, I've got the set? I mean, I have got the huge...
It's brilliant. I mean, the best of their stuff is as good as anything. There's a film of theirs called Big Business where they're trying to sell Christmas trees.
Oh, yes.
I mean, the editing of that is just as good as anything you would see in cinema of the time. We have a final thing where they have destroyed the man's house because he wouldn't buy a Christmas tree. He's destroyed their car.
Yes.
Everybody's standing around crying.
The car's collapsing.
The car's collapsed.
Yes.
The crowd are crying. We cut to a policeman that's crying. We cut to Stan and Ollie crying. And every single cut is a huge laugh when you show it to a live audience. Yes. It's a massive laugh still. It's as beautiful as watching a Swiss clock. The timing... This was edited in 1928. Every single joke that's meant to be there is there. 1, 2, 3 in a row. Yes. Fantastic.
I love the ones. They're always inevitable when poor old Stan inevitably would leave the gas on in the kitchen.
Yes.
And Ollie, of course, for whatever reason, would strike a match and go striding in, and poof, there with the explosion, and some sort of Ollie flew across the room. I mean, goodness knows, how they did stunts like that.
There was no health and safety. So you tend to. My favourite line in any one of their films is a film called Going Bye-Bye, where they have to get out of town because they've sent this criminal to prison, and they've got to get out of town in case he escapes. And so it's one of those old-fashioned candlestick phones where Stan's holding on to the main bit and hands the speaking bit to Ollie. But instead of handing him the speaking bit of the phone, he hands him a tin of carnation milk, which he also happens to have in his hand. Ollie takes the tin of carnation milk, pours it up to his head, looks at us as the milk runs down his cheek, as you can see him thinking, this is carnation milk. He says, he just dabs himself for a moment, speaks back into the receiver, says, "Pardon me, my ear is full of milk." In a polite, southern, gentlemanly way. As if, of course, I went, well, yes, of course, it happens to me all the time. Pardon me, my ear is full of milk.
Did you approve of the colorisation of some of that?
No, dreadful.
Yeah, it never looked quite right, did it? Way Out West was a wonderful film. I used to love it.
It's lit for black and white, so you can't. It's not lit for colour. So if the film had been, that's why it's as nonsense as sort of. Yeah, I mean, it's lit for sort of enhancing, making sure you can see the face is black and white. There's no subtlety going on. Colour doesn't add anything to it at all, apart from making it look strange.
In terms of talent, I mean, because they could do everything, couldn't they? The comedians sang, they danced. all of that. I mean, where would you rank them in the pantheon, as it were?
Oh well, I mean, I think they're the most enduring double act that the cinema has ever seen. I mean, they're sort of the cinema equivalent of Morecambe and Wise, really. You can't imagine there's ever going to be a better pairing. They were. Stan Laurel's story is quite intriguing, really. He came over.
He's English, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was. Yes. He went over to America with Charlie Chaplin, in 1913, when they were both with the Fred Karno troupe. In fact, Fred Karno's offices were just around the corner from here, I think. Just in Kennington over the back there somewhere.
What a great name.
Fred Karno, yeah, he was a real man. And
people forget that, probably.
Well, yes, I mean, it was during the First World War. One of the things was Fred Karno's army and stuff, when, things weren't going right. Yeah. And so Stan and Charlie go over to America in 1913, and Stan is Charlie's understudy. And so Charlie's doing this drunk act, which he was got very, very famous for, and Stan's basically, the two of them room together in 1913, trying to cook kippers on an open fire about the landlady finding out and all this sort of thing. Within a year of that, Charlie Chaplin is the most famous man in the world. He goes into films. The popularity of films burgeoning all over the place. The Nickelodeons in America. If you were foreign, you didn't understand the language of the country you're in, it didn't matter. You could go to the cinema and watch these moving pictures of cowboys and westerns. And
it must have been fascinating.
Fascinating.
Incredible.
And so from 1913, Stan watched Charlie become the biggest star in the world. He was making little solo films himself, Stan Laurel, with no degree of great success. Teamed up with Oliver Hardy in 1927 and bang, became as big as Chaplin. It was as huge as Charlie,
What's about the silent aspect that stands out for you then? Why are you particularly fond of that?
If it's done well, if it's the best of the silent films, it's like the big business thing with the Laurel and Hardy thing. You've just seen visuals, there's nothing to interrupt the laugh. In some of the early Marx Brothers films, you miss what Groucho has said because there's a laugh from the audience. You can't, and also because, a bit like radio, not supplying the pictures, you have to concentrate a bit more. You have to bring something to the medium. You have to bring something to silent film. If you look away from the screen, it's gone. It doesn't exist. You've got your live music playing, but if you're not looking at it there for that moment, it's gone. And that attention is rewarded when people just see how good we did a gig in Blackpool a couple of weeks ago. I showed Safety Last, this one with Harold Lloyd's hanging off a clock. I mean, the audience, the last half hour of it, they scream, they go wild. At one point, a mouse runs up his trouser leg. He's dancing on the ledge. The audience is screaming. It really grabs them in a way that a modern film doesn't.
Remarkable.
Because it's an involvement. Of course, there's live people playing instruments as well. You feel as if there's a bit of a concert going on.
Yeah.
So,
how important is that accompaniment?
Totally.
Piano? I mean,
totally.
Is it written to match?
The guys I work with improvise it, but you can get, back in the 1920s, say, a Douglas Fairbanks film, The Black Pirate, released in Technicolor, Leicester Square Odeon would have had a 60-piece orchestra playing. Really? To accompany that, yeah, absolutely. In fact, when sound film first came in, it wasn't to promote talkies. It was the idea that at your local cinema, you could see John Barrymore in Don Juan with an orchestral soundtrack, and you can hear it as you might have heard it at Carnegie Hall. So it wasn't initially thinking about speech at all. It was just thinking about getting the musical soundtrack to be more democratic, I suppose.
Yeah. Oh, it's amazing that someone who's made his life out of being very quick-witted verbally should have such a fascination for something which there is none of it.
A funny visual joke stays with you forever. I saw one once. It happened completely by accident. And it was just something. I happened to be in the right place at the right time. I was about 10 years old, walking around the back of this sort of tower block. There's this real gust of wind right in front of me. Across my vision, I see a man's trilby hat doing somersaults in the wind at 20 miles an hour, followed quickly by a cheap ginger wig, also turning somersaults, followed by a little further behind by a man with a big red face, no hat, bald-headed man, running after the other two. In a space of 7 seconds, that passed my vision. I was, that was 45 years ago. I've never forgotten that. No. I don't suppose I ever will.
I still laugh at Laurel and Hardy.
They are fantastic. They're good. They're
live
good.
Forever. Buster Keaton, Charlie Chaplin. Who do you particularly prefer?
Chaplin's the one, really. He's the one that sort of, I don't know what the equivalent would be in cricket, but when Charlie started, maybe Bradman, he just revolutionised what people could do. Within 2 years of Charlie making his first film, which basically the first film is just people kicking each other, pies and just throwing and falling over and stuff. Charlie made a film called The Tramp where he gets, hurt in love and he gets jilted in love and he walks away from the camera and people felt something for that figure. That was revolutionary in 1915, that those black and white silhouettes on the wall could make you feel something. You expected that in music, you expected that in theatre or opera. But cinema, which wasn't even called cinema, it was like a sheet hanging on the wall. That could move you, that could do something. And Chaplin showed, I mean, other people have tried it in drama, but he showed you could combine that and comedy together. And when you care about the person on screen, then the richer experience is to be had.
Yeah. And is that why it's so powerful? Because it was new? I mean, is that why?
In the 10 years, I mean, it's like sort of looking at sort of what the Beatles did in the 5 or 6 years they were recording. You can't believe they started off with Love Me Do and ended up with A Day in the Life, but they did. It was the same with Chaplin and his contemporaries. What passed for very entertaining fare in 1914, 3 years later looked banal and ridiculous, no plot line, no motivation, all the people look the same, the camera doesn't move, so so by the time Charlie made The Gold Rush in 1925 and Keaton made The General, these were classic films of cinema which still work today. They are amongst the early greats of cinema, and that achievement in the space of 10 years is rather extraordinary.
Yeah. Is comedy today as powerful and as long-living as that, do you think? Is it anything that you've done?
No.
We're talking about, Paul Merton,
I don't think so, no. I mean, it's sort of the have I got news for you thing, by its very nature, is sort of, you think, well, it's topical, so it's dead and buried. But funny enough, there is a certain fun to be had at watching it 5 years old and think, we were worried about that then or whatever. Yes. But no, I think that by its very nature, topicality has its sort of inbuilt sort of
it's a shelf life.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. But the fact that I'm doing comedy, the fact I'm doing the Comedy Store live, I do Just a Minute with Henry. Henry's on Just a Minute on Monday.
We're going to talk about that in a moment.
He was actually very, very good.
Don't tell him that.
Well, no, the thing is, you entered into the spirit of it, and the spirit of it is to have fun. And in terms of, if you're a raconteur, which Henry is, hesitation, repetition, deviation are all part of your armoury. Emphasis is repetition when you want to make a point, but you can't. None of that helps in Just a Minute, as you will.
We'll find out at
some point.
The travel stuff that you've done,
yes,
and India in particular, always interests us.
Oh, India, yes, what a place.
We love the colour, and for you, someone who loves cricket too.
Yeah, well, I mean, that was the thing. You down the side of a hotel, there's a little alleyway, and there'll be 4 people playing cricket with sort of like a stick and something. And I think when I was there, the Indian team had just come back from Australia, having won their first ever series in Australia. And for 2 weeks, the gods had come down from heaven. The adulation. Tendulkar said something yesterday. What's your reaction to what he said yesterday? Or my reaction is this. Okay, what was your reaction to that? And I kept it going for 2 weeks. For 2 weeks, it was just. But then the other side of that, I imagine, can be quite grim, because if you elevate your sportsmen to that height.
Yes.
What happens when they turn out to be less than superhuman? The downside of it must be pretty intense as well.
Yeah. Well, you really wrapped up with it, the whole cricket business of it, India. You really find yourself caught up in it.
Totally. Yes. I mean, we played, one of the sequences we did was a guy that sort of runs a team for blind cricketers, and they I mean, that is amazing skill, how you can sort of tune your ears into hearing which way a ball is coming towards you.
Unbelievable, isn't it?
It is extraordinary. How anybody manages to do that, but they can, and it's the total intensity. I think you were talking on here, this programme a few weeks ago, about Tendulkar can only drive round India sort of in the middle of the night or something.
Yes.
But it grips them like nothing else. I mean, somebody said it was the 3rd biggest religion or something in India. I mean, it is intense. I don't know, it worries me slightly when somebody likes something that much, but there we are,
How did you find something? I mean, I haven't seen, if I was that travel programme, but lots of travel programmes have been done about India. What was different about yours? What did you go there to do?
We didn't go to the Taj Mahal.
Oh, well done.
We decided, people knew what that looked like.
Yes.
It was a bit like when we went to China. Do we want to go to the Great Wall of China? There was an option on this particular day. We decided months before we went, but you can either go to the Great Wall of China or you can meet this man who makes robots. So obviously there's no, we went to meet the man who made robots.
Yes.
In India...
Was he interesting?
Oh, he was fantastic. At first, the robots are like nose bigger than that teacup, like that. And you see that, and you think, that's nice, whatever. And then the next thing you see is him being pulled along in his own personal chariot by a 10-foot-high walking robot. Promise you, walking like this. His wife, she's just shaking her head. And he's got no training at all. He's completely taught himself, this guy, and he makes his most amazing, useless robots. I mean, he made a walking table, right? a table with 4 legs that walk. Right. Now, what do you think happens to the surface of a table that's walking? Do you think it keeps rock steady, or do you think it sort of goes up and down like that?
What an extraordinary thing.
Yeah, you know, who wants a walking table? So you can press a button and a table walks towards you, spilling all its contents.
So it's a hopeless invention, really.
Totally hopeless. Totally hopeless. And this man lives in the middle of nowhere. He doesn't need a robot. I mean, it's not like he's got to get into town or something. And all the neighbours walking by, they just take no notice. They just all look the other way. And so I'm talking to his wife through translator, you know, and she's saying, well, you know, I said, how'd you get on with this, your husband's hobby? He says, well, last year he burnt the kitchen down. And I said, OK, no more robots. And then he gets very sad. For 3 months he doesn't eat, and then I say, OK, you can make robots, and then he is happy again. And so he just sulked until he was allowed to make robots again.
What parts is he using? Bits of metal and
I don't know where he gets it from. It's in the middle of nowhere. I mean, it's like reed beds. There's like some rude huts around. I mean, I don't know, unless there was a factory churning this stuff out around the corner. But I don't know, scrap or something, and he just finds something, or that'll make a good 12-foot robot or something. Yeah. I don't know, or nail that to that or whatever. Weld this. I mean, it explained to me the guy's an absolute genius, and if he'd had any sort of training at all, he'd probably be one of the world's top engineers. But he's making walking tables.
Building missiles or
well, yes, quite.
When you come back from these places, you're travelling like that, you always glad to get back here. You're a Brit at heart.
They're very hard work. They're hard work to do. I suppose I'm a Brit at heart. They are hard work. I mean, particularly India and China are 2 of the toughest places to film. If you any experience of driving around in India, you'll know the roads are absolutely dreadful there.
Yes, indeed.
They're quite intense, you know. So it's sort of.
And when quite frightening, actually.
Oh yeah, I mean, driving at night was something that we only did once. It wasn't great. And the statistic is, you know, you travel least on a public road in India, you get killed anywhere in the world. You know, you only go a few miles in India, or a few thousand miles or something. So it's the intensity of the job. You're glad to get back. You bond well with the crew, because those are the guys really who are going to save. You're going to make the programme look good. The cameraman that gets up at 2:30 in the morning to get the sunrise from the top of the hotel,
absolutely,
is the guy that's got you that shot where people go, oh, that looks nice.
Yeah.
So you have to remember that those are the guys who are actually putting the stuff together that makes you look good in what you're doing.
Sunrise over the Taj Mahal. I mean, any travel programme has to have it.
I think in the end we bought a tea towel and we held that up and people could see that it was the Taj Mahal.
Actually, my wife wouldn't go. She hasn't been to India before, and I booked the Taj Mahal last time. She said, I'm not going. She said, I don't need to go and do that. I want to go and do... I went to see tigers, actually, instead.
Well, yes. I mean, there is... go and see the tigers. They're likely to disappear before the Taj Mahal, I think, the current rate of survival.
We found some too, which is great. Now, I mentioned, of course, that Paul is a regular on Just a Minute. This week, he has been joined by a new panellist.
And Henry, we'll be back with you to begin, and the subject is being a James Bond baddie. 60 seconds starting now.
I first became a James Bond baddie in 1961 with the publication by Ian Fleming of Thunderball. Ian and my father had been friends of a sort at school. My father was 3 years older than him. And although Fleming always liked to take the names of people he didn't get on with at school for his baddies, that hint suggests that my father, in fact, wasn't as great a friend as all that.
So challenged.
I was on Fleming, so, and you stopped me with your hand. Foul play.
So I think that's very sad.
My hand slipped. And I withdraw my challenge because I would like to hear about Ian Fleming.
Henry, she's withdrawn her challenge. You've got time to take another breath and carry on with being a James Bond baddie. 36 seconds are starting now.
My father and Ian Fleming may not have been the great...
Go on, keep going.
My father and Ian Fleming may not have been the greatest of friends.
I've got a suggestion.
Yeah.
Can we call this round My Father and Ian Fleming? Let's do that.
One every minute, isn't
So
it?
give Paul a bonus point for a suggestion. Right, so the subject has now become My Father and Ian Fleming. So My Father and Ian Fleming, and 32 seconds, Henry, starting now.
They knew each other, and fairly well.
Henry, wasn't that fun?
Well, it was a bit like my kitchen table late at night, which starts walking.
Yes.
I don't think we've ever done that before. We've changed the subject halfway through. It was anyway, because Henry couldn't be done for repetition then of saying my father and Ian Fleming.
No. it was
but you must have told,
difficult.
I think, exactly, because you must have told that story about your father and Ian Fleming 1,000,000 times.
Yes,
but
indeed.
not under that sort of pressure.
No.
And you couldn't get your minute done.
No, I was at repetition. I was awful. I thought I'd worked it out. Actually, I really did do some sort of thinking about it, but it just went to nothing. And then, of course, the audience started laughing. And
Yes.
so and then I realised I was absolutely comprehensively up the spout.
Yes.
And it was only. And then, of course, Paul did me completely at one stage when I was nervous about pressing the buzzer, and there was a thing, I can't remember what it was, that when I thought, I wonder if that is repetition. Anyway, he pressed the buzzer next door to me and said, no, it wasn't me, it was Henry's buzzer that went off first. And then I had to pick up the story and take it on, something I knew absolutely nothing about. It was wonderful. I really haven't enjoyed making a fool of myself so much for ages.
It's something you can get used to. I'm not making a fool of yourself, but actually, there must be a technique to
There
speaking
is,
from.
but you always make those mistakes. It's like golf or something, or cricket. You can say, well, I've studied the technique, but you'll always make a mistake. There'll always be an error. There'll always be something, and that's the fun of it. If you didn't make those errors, there wouldn't be the show. And that's what was so funny about Henry doing it. I think the audience immediately identified and say, if I was doing it, I'd be doing it like that, and that's what they find amusing about it.
Did you get a home run, Henry?
What was so incredible was Sue Perkins, who did 2 home runs that evening, didn't she?
For a minute
Which apparently is the first time that's ever happened.
In the same programme, first time that the same person has done it twice. She just has the gift for it. She can just talk and not. And Stephen Fry is the other one that's
put him many times on there.
Yes, I mean, you can, if he's got the subject of the ocean, he'll talk about the ocean, the briny surface, the sea, the H2O volume of it. He'll say everything but ocean. He'll find a brilliant way of describing that. And but even the best players will always slip up somewhere. They'll suddenly say BBC and they get buzzed for repetition of B or something.
It's one of the great shows, though.
It is. Very, very simple to understand.
Yes.
Kids love it. That's when I first got into it, when I was that age, about 10. It's it's very easy and yet capable of endless variation. Depends on who's playing it. I mean, Henry's played it in a way where he just went for it and enjoyed it and got a point. Okay,
that sounds like Henry, though.
But it was one. I mean, Sue and Paul were like Mr. and Mrs. Bradman. I mean, if you see what I mean in cricketing terms.
Yes.
I mean, he gets absolutely nothing wrong, and you really feel when he does, he's only doing it to be mischievous.
Yes.
and
Did you feel really nervous doing it? Right?
I was a bit to start with. Of course, I was. I thought, goodness, I don't think I went in there thinking, goodness, yes, this may not be too difficult, and then I suddenly realised we were all sitting in the sort of caravan, the hospitality suite, green room, whatever you like to call it, drinking cups of coffee, and I thought, oh goodness, I'm not sure about this. And then I got onto the stage, and actually I was slightly unnerved because Darren Nicholas had a way of introducing me as Henry Blowfield.
Yes.
And I thought, well, I wonder if he's coming on. Look round.
Henry Blowfield.
Yes, that was right. It's an easy thing.
But dear old Nicholas, I mean, what was he? He must be 90.
Amazing.
Is he 90?
He's now admitting to 90 because, he's 90 in October and he's having a big bash.
Brilliant.
He's
a big cricket man.
He's a huge
Loves his cricket.
Lord
He's on view for the
Taverners,
boundary.
yes, absolutely. I mean, he's of an age now. When I first started doing the programme, he was 65, and his strength of mind, his wit, his judgment of the programme, it's wonderful. His voice sounds as strong as ever. It's my favourite show that I do. Anything I do in showbiz is my favourite job. I just love it. When I used to live in the bedsit, I talked about it before. I used to record Just a Minute on the radio and play back the tapes and things, and the fact that I'm in it and involved in it still is just an absolute joy. I just can't believe my luck.
The other lovely thing about Nicholas is his sartorial elegance hasn't dimmed either.
Absolutely.
Stripy jackets.
He had a blue one, actually,
did he?
Didn't he? Then I saw him walking around in the Pleasant Courtyard in a lovely red one.
Yes. He doesn't know. You mustn't tease him about his jackets, as I found out.
He takes them seriously.
He does. You can't say, there's a Ford Cortina with a car cover missing somewhere. Well, you can't do any of that. No, he always looks fantastic. I'm sure he's probably listening to this, so hello, Nicholas.
Well, no doubt Nicholas was at home listening in, a huge cricket fan, one of the game's great friends. Nicholas died early in 2020 at the age of 96, but was a regular at Test matches all his life.